Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Reddit video. I'm gonna start by saying thank you guys so much for hitting 100k on my channel. It means so much to me. This was my dream since I was a little kid, and I love you guys so much. Thank you. If you aren't subscribed, you should be, so go ahead and subscribe. Follow my Instagram, join my Discord, and if you like these Reddit videos, you might want to check out mine Snook's new podcast where we read scary Reddit stories together and discuss them. So all those links are down in the description, and yeah, let's get into these Reddit stories. This is one of my favorite collections I've done so far. You guys seem to like the longer videos, so I made sure to make this one extra long for you guys. So yeah, if you just want to chill, study, sleep, whatever, this video is great for that. Also, I get a lot of comments saying that you guys like to work when you're listening to these, like you put it on while you're at your job, which I think is awesome. White noise black screen. There's a video on YouTube simply titled White Noise Black Screen. It's a 10-hour long video designed for playing while you're asleep. It stands out among the other white noise videos though, because at around the 6-hour mark, there is a huge spike in the most replayed section. In case you don't know, most replayed is a feature on YouTube that shows what part of the video other people played over and over again. For most videos, it makes sense. On a creepy Urban Explorers video, the most replayed section might be where the person encounters a ghost or a creepy person, etc. Or a funny skit video might be most replayed at the punchline. But for a video that's playing white noise and a black screen for 10 hours, why would there be a most replayed section? But there it was. A 30-second portion of the video at the timestamp 6 hours, 18 minutes. Out of curiosity, I jumped to that part of the video and played it, but it looked and sounded the same as the rest of the video. Black screen, white noise. No blips in the audio or change in the visuals, as far as I could tell. Maybe that's when people get up. I mean, that was 6 hours of sleep, right? Maybe a lot of people woke up about 6 hours into the video and shut it off. They wouldn't really be replaying it though. And also, 30 seconds in a 10-hour video is too accurate. Some people would wake up 6 hours in, 6 hours 5 minutes in, etc. The most replayed feature showed a spike at exactly 6 hours, 18 minutes, 14 seconds. A huge, narrow spike specifically at that time, not a broader hump that would imply a range of wake-up times. Maybe someone linked the video at that time by accident and shared it to a lot of people. Comments were turned off, so I couldn't check if people were saying anything about it. Despite the weirdness, that night I decided to play the video while I slept. That's how I found the video in the first place. I really did need white noise. My neighbor's dog kept barking at 6 a.m. and I needed sleep. I pressed play on the video and went to bed, and woke up with a start in the middle of the night. I didn't know what woke me up. My phone said it was 3:37 a.m. My room was pitch black, except for the dark gray glow of the white noise, black screen video playing. I rolled over, pulled the blanket over me, and tried to fall back asleep. But my body was pumping with adrenaline. It was like I'd woken up from a nightmare or something, even though I didn't remember having one. I tried to relax, slowly counting in my head. That's when I heard something else. It's hard to describe, but I'll try. Some white noises are computer generated so that they truly make a uniform rushing sound the entire time. Others, however, especially in older sound machines, are actually a clip of white noise repeated over and over again. Listening to it long enough, your brain starts to pick out a pattern of the subtly changing tone, and it gets really annoying. That's what this felt like. My brain was suddenly picking out a pattern, a sort of rhythm to the white noise, even though I hadn't heard it when I fell asleep. The longer I lay there tossing and turning, the more my brain picked up on the pattern. A series of whooshes and clicks. It was really annoying. I'm one of those people who can't sleep in the same room with a ticking clock, and that's what this felt like. Whoosh, whoop, click, whoosh, whoop, click. My nerves grew ragged. Whoosh, whoop, click. Just when I couldn't stand it anymore. Just when I was about to get out of bed and turn it off, because anything, even barking dogs at 6 a.m. was better than this, heard it. A growling sound. Who's there? I shouted. Nothing. I sat up and my heart dropped. A pair of wide eyes floated in the darkness on my computer screen. I watched, frozen, as the eyes shifted off the computer screen. They hung in the darkness, a full foot away, staring me down. Then it moved. The eyes blazed white as the thing leapt at me, shadowy hands reaching across the bed, a shock of pain as something tightening around my wrist. I scrambled away, kicking, grabbed my phone off the nightstand, turned on the flashlight. Nothing was there. I ran to the door and turned on the lights. The bedroom was empty. I grabbed the laptop and saw that I was just past the 6-hour, 18-minute mark in the video, the most replayed part. I rewound it, replayed it. Nothing was there. No growl, no shadowy figure, no blazing white eyes. I ran to the bathroom and splashed water on my face, trying to calm myself, to break myself out of the panic. It was just a dream. You were half asleep. That's all it was. But when I looked down at my arm, I saw a purple bruise just above my wrist, in the shape of a slender, skeletal hand. Stay in your vehicle. Back in April of 2013, I went through something that I haven't been able to talk about. I was paid a significant amount of money to stay quiet in return for signing a 10-year agreement to shut the hell up. Now that the time is up, I've considered my options. I could just let this go and never speak of it again. I won't gain anything from speaking out, and I got a lot to lose. But then again, this is just an anonymous post online. Words have less meaning that way. West Virginia. It was hotter than usual, without a whiff of wind. I was coming home from a visit to my aunt. She'd broken her leg and couldn't leave her house. I was making my way back home, taking the I-64 out of Lewisburg. It started with the radio. It was playing that one Macklemore song I'd heard 100 times over. The sound was cutting in and out in a quick staccato, then disappeared completely. I could hear cars honking up front as a line began to form. There was a sway in the trees as if greater and greater pressure was being put on them. I could hear wind rushing against the left side of the car, forcing me to pull the other way to compensate. I closed the sunroof as a dust cloud blew past, staining the windshield. Then a rumble. It sounded like thunder, but from the ground. Like a groaning bellow, growing louder and clearer by the second. As it reached its peak, I could see trees toppling over. A small Kia got pushed off balance and swerved off the road. As the sound died down, the road devolved into chaos. Some were desperately changing lanes, others were stepping on the brakes. I got my door scraped as the car behind me sped past. The radio was playing an automated message. A local emergency alert, referred to as a geological event. We were asked to turn off all air conditioning, slow down, and divert to the nearest exit. It repeated in a monotone voice. Geological event, no air conditioning, slow down, divert to nearest exit. Minutes passed. There was a line forming further down the road. Police officers blocking the lanes in all directions, leaving a highway exit as the only option. Some folks were trying to push past the barricades, but were forced back at gunpoint. I could see officers wearing gas masks and riot shields. We were waved in. I followed the exit and got directed to the right. There was an open field that was used as sort of an impromptu parking lot. Cars were being waved in and parked in a way that boxed us in, leaving no room for us to open our doors in either direction unless we got parked at the edge. 4 lines of cars with about 10 to 15 vehicles per line. Surplus vehicles were directed further down the road. The place was packed. I got stuck in the second row about 6 cars in. Pretty much everyone around me were on their phones. I didn't have anyone to call, but there seemed to be an issue getting a signal through. The radio was still repeating the emergency message. Voices were getting louder. A man 2 cars to my left leaned out of a gap in the door, screaming at the officers to answer his question. They responded immediately with a warning shot straight into the air. "Stay in your vehicle," they screamed. "Lock your doors, I'm not telling you again." A couple of folks were filming, but there seemed to be trouble uploading. We were losing bandwidth. It didn't take long until phone signals were completely blocked. I think a video or 2 of that officer firing into the air made it online. They were patrolling back and forth. We were told to stay in our vehicles, windows up, doors closed and locked, engines off. I could hear people talking in the other cars. Someone said there'd been a natural gas leak from the geological event and that combustible engines could spark an explosion. Others were talking about a terrorist attack. There were no answers, and the officers weren't eager to talk. After about an hour, things were getting ugly. People were hungry, thirsty, and restless. One officer stepped up on the front cars, handing out water bottles, crackers, and processed cheese slices. He had to step from one car to another, denting the hoods with his steel-tipped shoes. They were also handing out thick, black, plastic hygiene bags for people who needed to relieve themselves. Use them, seal them, drop them out the door, then lock up and wait. I'd crawled into the back seat, pulled down my cap, and tried to relax. I'd been playing some games with my phone, but the battery was running low. I wanted to save some, so I settled for having a nap instead. The sweat was stinging my eyes. Not because of how warm it was, but because of how nervous I was. No matter what I did, I felt trapped, and the car felt smaller and smaller. I couldn't get out if I wanted to, and it physically hurt me to think about how little control I had. Is that what claustrophobia feels like? A couple of officers were discussing something by the front line. One of them had a white cotton glove on, which he used to wipe off the hood of one of the front cars. The glove was taken off and put into a bag, which in turn was sealed with a hot air gun. I was getting the impression that our cars had been covered in something. I wasn't the only one considering it. There were 2 college kids in the car to my left, and they were discussing it too. "Anthrax," one of them said. "Gotta be." "Nah, gold dust," the other chuckled. "They don't want to share." "You know what?" the first groaned. "I honest to God hope you're right. You're not, but I hope you are. Fuck you." I joined in the conversation shortly after. I offered some explanation, something combustible, something that might blow up if we started our cars. They were willing to consider this. The car behind me couldn't hear us, but the driver held up a notebook with the text, "If we dunno what it's gotta be aliens." I couldn't tell if they were serious, but they weren't laughing about it. A man in his 50s and what looked like his daughter. There were a couple of other folks in the other cars. A man in a black shirt, sort of looked like a preacher without a collar. Two middle-aged women with a kid in the back seat. A fat man blaring Johnny Cash from his stereo. A couple with a teenage son who couldn't stop drumming on the windows. We'd been stuck for about 2.5 hours when a truck rolled in, one of those with a large water tank. It was unmarked, looked civilian. As it rolled in, they were calling out on the megaphone. "We'll be hosing your vehicles down," they said. "Keep everything locked and closed. Then we'll be covering your vehicle with a protective plastic while we wait for it to dry. After that, we'll start letting you go in an orderly manner." I repeat, most of us were relieved. It was only a matter of time now. It was getting dark. They were getting up on the cars, hosing them down thoroughly. Smelled of chlorine, so maybe they'd mixed something into the water. As they came to my car, they stepped up on it and double-checked the sunroof, making sure it was locked and secured. They sprayed the car down, bathing it in chemical stink, the kind that gets stuck to the back of your throat. It took a long time for them to finish, at least an hour or two. After that, they were rolling out a kind of plastic cover at the short side of the lot, the kind you use to protect pools or rain covers for football fields. They used 2 squad cars to slowly drape the thing over the entire lot, securing the edges with large rocks. "Please stay calm," they called out as the plastic crawled over us. "I know this is uncomfortable, but this is for your own safety. Once the cleaning is done, you'll be free to go. Stay inside your vehicle at all times." I repeat, I did as I was told. I stayed inside and I watched that plastic cover sweep over me. Felt like being buried alive. All lights went out, leaving me in complete darkness, accompanied only by the vague, disembodied voices of the others. The college kids were talking about where they were going to go after this. Someone was honking. Not sure if it was to show support or discontent. Someone else was cheering. I took my last swig of water, washing down my final plain cracker. I got back in the driver's seat. I could hear as they finished moving the plastic cover and parking their squad vehicles. I waited patiently, figuring it'd be maybe another hour or so. They hadn't really given us a timeline, but I could breathe a little easier. Sort of. I was going back and forth between feeling empowered with my hands on the wheel and feeling like I was stuck in a metal coffin. It was so dark and everything smelled of plastic and chemicals, like a car wash stuck in time. As the excitement died down, I paid more attention to the background sounds. I tried to filter out the various discussions from the nearby cars, and somewhere in the distance, I heard raised voices. It wasn't coming from the cars, but from the officers. Whatever they were talking about, it was a heated discussion. An hour came and went, and people were getting impatient. More cars were honking, others were yelling, demanding answers. I couldn't get my leg to stop shaking. The more I thought about getting out of there, the smaller I felt. I was hyper-focusing on things I couldn't control. I was a little thirsty and I was out of water. I needed to use the bathroom. I wanted to stretch my legs and go for a walk. I wanted to breathe fresh air and get that awful chemical taste out of my mouth. I heard cars starting, accelerating. The truck was moving, somewhere off to the side. "We need you to stay in your vehicle," a voice screamed over the megaphone. "Do not leave for any reason. Stay in your vehicle." Cars speeding off. Not many, but a couple. Then quiet. The officers left us there. Everyone was quiet. A couple of folks had opened up their phones, using them as flashlights to look from car to car. Looking out of the sea of vehicles, all of us trapped under that dark cover, I could see a handful of lights cut off by sharp silhouettes. I couldn't make out who was who in the dark. It was just all people, anonymous. I heard a gasp somewhere in the back. There was a metallic clunk, like when the officers climbed atop our cars to get us our water. There was a careful cheer, as some folks figured they were taking off the plastic cover, but that wasn't it. Instead, there were more footsteps. The cheers slowly died down as more and more footsteps pattered across our cars. I stopped counting after a dozen. The silhouettes and the other cars were still. We all held our breaths, waiting for an answer to show itself. What the hell was going on? What was that sound? Somewhere off to my right, I heard a voice. "Who's up there?" It sounded like an older man. I'd seen a pickup truck that way earlier. Almost as a response, the footsteps stopped. There was a faint clicking sound, like someone snapping their tongue against the roof of their mouth. Click, click, and from further away, a click in response. From somewhere to my left, another couple clicks. Then a cascade of clicks, dozens, maybe hundreds. There was an awful metallic noise coming from my right, then breaking glass. A scream, cut short, followed by several irregular taps of the car horn. One of the silhouettes in the distance turned into a blur as something passed through the windshield, cutting through the plastic cover. Somewhere in the front row, the roof of a car was cut wide open. Someone was pulled up out of their seat. 2 cars back from where I was, there was more glass breaking. It sounded like a wild animal got in. I could see a weak hint of red spattered against the passenger side windows. I wasn't getting any air. I could feel my heart beating through my chest as my arms started shaking. My hands were cramped around the steering wheel and I felt sweat dripping down my shoulders. I couldn't control it. I didn't even see what was going on, but these sounds, these screams, they awakened something primal. This was danger, a threat. My body knew long before I did. The college kids in the other car were ducking down. One of them waved a hand at me as if telling me to get down. I nodded. I scrambled into the back seat. I couldn't see where I was putting my hands or my feet. Everything is different in the dark. As I tumbled my way over, my foot accidentally tapped the car horn. It was a quick tap, a fraction of a second, but to me, it was the loudest sound in the world. I was lying on my stomach in the back seat, and within seconds, something heavy climbed onto the hood of my car. I could feel the car buckling. It was much heavier than the man who'd passed out those water bottles. I held my hands in front of my mouth to stop the panting, but I just ended up snorting up sweat instead. My nose stung as I bit my tongue, listening to every metallic groan as whatever was outside moved and shifted. Click, click, and from behind my car, a click in response. There were no lights being held up anymore. Everyone was cowering, going quiet. I pushed myself up against the door behind the driver's seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. I could hear the frame of the car complain as something slowly moved. When it came to my sunroof, there was a slight crack. That made it stop. Another crack. I silently shook my head, as if trying to ask the car to stop. That thing was going to break, and it did. My legs were showered with glass as a big blob of plastic cover dipped into my car. Something big came tumbling into the front seat, still covered in protective plastic. It twitched and spun around, its clicking turning from a careful question-like noise to a never-ending barrage. It was calling for help, alerting others, and it was cutting its way through the plastic. There were footsteps coming from every direction. Some of them were leaping from car to car. Some of them leaping far enough to skip a car as they hurried. I was going to be swarmed within seconds. I fumbled with my hands, accidentally cutting my thumb on the broken glass. I managed to open the passenger side door, but even at its widest and even when pressing into the college kid's car, it wasn't enough room to get out. Still, I had to try. I pressed myself into the gap and exhaled as much as I could, flattening my chest. While the thing thrashed around inside my car, I could feel my vision going faint. Black spots popped up at the edge of my vision. My arms were going weak, and yet, by some miracle, I made it through. As my face hit the gravel of the makeshift parking lot, I felt the burn of residual chemicals. I swallowed my instinct to run, instead staying on my stomach, forcing myself to crawl under the car. There were more of them, some climbing on, some off. My chest was pressed into the ground as the weight shifted. I heard breaking glass from the windshield and tearing fabric. Something was stuck up there, and it was furious, like a trapped animal. I could hear the college kids mumbling to one another, trying to stay calm. One reassuring the other that all they had to do was stay low, stay quiet, and wait. Then something slammed into the passenger side door, the one I'd crawled out of. The door was pressed up against the neighboring car, then fell haphazardly to the ground, completely off the hinges. An ink-like, bird-like foot touched the ground right next to me. I've looked it up since. There were 3 toes forward, 1 toe backward, all clawed. Anisodactyl feet, similar to that of many birds of prey, except larger than a human foot, and with smooth, slick skin. It must have been heavy, at least 400 pounds. If the clicking noise came from its mouth, I can approximate that it was somewhere between 6'7" to 6'9", or taller. It could have been hunched over. How it managed to walk in the gap between the vehicles is beyond me, but I suspect it was very thin. It daintily walked from my car to the others, as if scanning for something. I could barely see anything in the dark, but this thing seemed to navigate it perfectly. It didn't bump into anything. There was a tap on the glass of the car behind me, to my right, and someone got startled. A short scream, and the hunt was on. This time was different. It must have caused some kind of chain reaction, as all of a sudden the plastic cover was getting torn up left and right. People were clawing their way out of their cars. I heard someone kicking against the windshield. Another was trying to open their door. I could hear it slamming against the side of the car next to them. And off in the distance there was gunfire, just a couple of shots. The college kids in the car next to me slammed their doors open and followed my lead. They rolled onto the ground and under their car. There was a little more light coming in as the cover had been torn above. Their faces were red from tears, and one of them was desperately trying to call for help on his phone. The other grabbed the phone out of his hand. A short scuffle ensued, ending with them putting on a ringtone and sliding the thing as far to the left as they could. Whatever car that phone landed under was demolished, every window broken, every passenger gone. I could hear the grinding as the seat was ripped in two and thrown away. In a matter of seconds, an entire vehicle was torn to pieces as a dozen of those things swarmed it. "Shut up!" one of the college kids repeated. "Shut up, shut up, shut up." Something reached under my car. It scraped against the sole of my shoe, tearing a hole all the way to my big toe. I hurried forward, scurrying like a lizard. The college kids noticed and followed suit. I don't think they thought too much about it. It was just movement, and they all went for it. I made it 2 cars down before I got stuck. There was something dark in the way, and I couldn't get around it without exposing myself. I couldn't see what it was, but it didn't take long for me to figure it out. There was a meaty crunch, as if someone was biting chunks out of a piece of meat. It was struggling to get through the fabric of their clothes, making a snapping noise as threads gave way. A pool of blood rolled under the car, staining the tip of my fingers. It was still warm. One of those things was eating a victim. I hunkered down, trying to remember to breathe, and I stayed there, waiting for a chance. Any chance. I must have stayed there for at least an hour, hearing every bite, every crack of bones and snap of sinew. Satisfied clicking noises. As it finished its meal, it wandered off, dragging the remains along. They were moving forward. Something heavy walked over the car I was hiding under, dragging a body along. Slowly, the footsteps disappeared. It was quiet again, and in that quiet, I found my footing. I made my way to the edge of the plastic cover. I listened one final time, pushed one of the weights away, and slipped through. They were gone, and I was out. I could feel my chest growing lighter, allowing me to breathe. I wanted to cry from relief. A breeze was picking me up, drying the sweat on my brow and carrying the smell of grass. Stepping back, I turned towards the sea of cars to see how bad the damage was. And then I saw one. It was a bit off to the side, perching on top of an old Honda. At a glance, it looked like a tall person, covered in a slick black ink. But looking closer, you could see the strange bird-like feet, the pointed nails, the long row of shark-like teeth on a mouth that was far too wide. I froze. The thing rose to its full length, easily over 7 feet tall. It looked ready to pounce on me. I had nothing to defend myself with. I couldn't make any sudden moves. I wouldn't even be halfway under the car before that thing would be over me. 100 thoughts raced through my head, but there was nothing I could do. I was out of options. But the thing just looked at me. It raised a slice of raw meat. Blood dripped onto the plastic cover. It looked at me curiously, taking a bite. Then, as if nothing had happened, it wandered off, satiated. I was left there, shaking like a dry leaf, and with the last of those things gone, all that was left was the panic. It didn't take long for the officers to return. The plastic cover was removed, but we couldn't go home. Not after this. Some folks signed a waiver and were let go immediately. They weren't allowed to talk about what they'd seen, and in return, they'd get a hefty sum of insurance money. Others demanded answers and were taken into custody for obstruction of justice. A few others still were too panicked to make any kind of sense and had to be checked out by medical personnel. A total of 14 people died. It was described by a combination of causes: a traffic pileup, carbon monoxide poisoning, animal attack. I think there was something about an escaped convict too. Excuses all over the place, and the times were all wrong, spread out through a couple of days to more smoothly blend into accident statistics. And if you wanted to go home and get your insurance money, you had to sign a non-disclosure. I did it too. I know the college kids did as well. Goddamn miracle they made it out, but I saw them. 34 cars had to be towed. 18 people wounded, 6 seriously so. 4 people lost at least 1 limb. 1 guy had an arm ripped off halfway up his collarbone. I don't know how he survived. Most people never saw the things up close. They just remember the screams and the breaking glass. Sometimes at night, that's all I hear too. Closing my eyes reminds me of lying under those cars, feeling the pressure as the weight shifted. I still get trouble breathing. I think a part of me is still stuck there. It stayed in my vehicle. The office across the street is stuck in a time loop. I'm not sure how much longer I have left to write this. Karen is staring, and quite frankly, she's the office bitch, so there's no telling how long I have before she tattles on me to the boss. So I'll just cut to the chase. I work for a public relations agency in Boston, Massachusetts. Don't Google it, you won't be able to find it anyways. That's kind of the whole point of public relations. we are doing our job correctly if you have no idea we exist. We handle brand management, media relations, crisis control, and social media campaigns for a whole buttload of companies, which means I'm usually too busy to glare out the window in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday. But I just happened to glance over at 2:32 p.m. and boom, there it was, the perfect view of the office across the street. But I'll get to that. See, I was just promoted to vice president. It was a title that came along with a nice little pay bump and an even nicer corner office. My company is located on the 13th floor, so I have a sweeping view of the city, which also means that I have a view into the office across the street from us. Like most Boston buildings, it's pretty old from what I can tell. It's made up of brick and steel with large, shiny windows stretched between aged brick. But the people, now that's what caught my eye. There I was, just minding my business on a conference call, sipping a latte, when a flash of color spurted across my peripheral vision. I turned to look out the window just in time to see a mousy, middle-aged woman slap a tall woman across the face. I paused, my mouth hanging wide open, as I watched the tall coworker sob openly, her hand pressed against her swollen cheek. The red flower in her hair crumpled to the ground. "Kate, are you still there?" The phone buzzed in my ear. "Oh, right, yes. Sorry," I mumbled. "The analytics report suggests that we should push for more ad spend. We believe this would increase consumer engagement. I'm not sure if the client will go for that." My boss tisked in my ear. "We can bring it up on our next call," I said hesitantly, my eyes still trained on the office across the street. The mousy woman was now confronting another coworker, a man. He seemed to be in his late 30s, with peppered hair and tan skin. His hand was on the tall woman's lower back, comforting her. The mousy woman had her finger in his face, wriggling it out of anger. Was that a wedding ring? Yeah. That has to be. Is she married to the man? Then what is she doing comforting the tall girl? And if we have it by Friday, then we can beat the press release. Right, Kate? Right, I mumbled, still distracted. "I'll take care of it." I turned back to the office window, but the three figures were gone, replaced by a darkened office. How did they get out of there so quickly? "Great, Kate. Well then, that's your action item." The phone chirped. Of course. I felt dazed, almost as if I was waking up from a dream. I hung up the phone and pressed my cool palm to my eyes. I blinked and took a sip of coffee, glancing back towards the office window. It was still dark, almost pitch black despite the midday sun. I willfully turned away and focused on the press release due on Friday. By the end of the day, I had forgotten all about the peculiar scene from the office across the street. The only reminder was a strange, blooming red flower that appeared in my dreams that night. It blossomed and withered over and over, over and over, over and over. The next morning, I came in with a bagel and a double espresso, prepared to tackle the mountain of tasks I had at hand. But when I sat down at my desk, I had the strangest notion that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I shivered, unable to shake the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. I turned to look at the office across the street, expecting to see some kind of fight or brawl or something. Instead, I saw only deep, unflinching darkness, which was weirdly worse than the slap I saw yesterday. But why was the office still dark? It was 9 a.m. People should be in the office by now. But whatever, not my problem if they were a lazy bunch. A few hours ticked by until it was the midday slump. I yawned and stretched at my desk, swiveling my chair around to the window. The office across the street was now lit up and there were people moving. Well, two figures in particular. The tall woman, the woman who was slapped the other day, was meeting with the man whose wife did the slapping. She was perched on the edge of his desk, her red dress riding up her thigh. He was leaning towards her, smiling and twirling a pin in between his fingers. Immediately, I moved closer to the window. It was pretty obvious what these two were up to, and you could kiss my sweet ass if you think I'd miss what was about to go down. The man was gently rubbing her thigh, all the while maintaining eye contact with the sheet of paper he had in front of him. The girl was playing coy, too, leaning forward slightly to point out something on the paper. Her tits bounced near his flushed cheek. Even from this distance, I could make out the photo of him and his mousy wife on their wedding day propped up on his desk. Figures. I guess the man was done being coy because he took his hand and slid it up all the way the girl's tight dress, pulling her panties off in one quick motion. And the next thing I knew, I was basically watching a adult video. He took her right there on the desk. To hell with paperwork. Their passionate lovemaking sent his briefcase, coffee mug, and papers flying to the floor. Even the photo of his doting wife was smacked to the ground by the girl's right thigh as he pumped his way into her from behind. When they were done, they neatly picked up the paperwork and spilled office items and rearranged them on the desk. The photo was the only casualty. The glass had cracked on impact. The girl was just pulling her dress down when the mousy woman knocked on the door. I was shook. This was the kind of drama people paid for, and here I was receiving it for free. I practically had my face glued to the window. From my viewpoint, I could see the corner our office, his office, and the adjacent room next to his. The room was filled with a few desks and your typical office artwork. Nothing that stood out as exceptionally noteworthy. Though I'm sure the office must have been filled at this point, I could only make out these two rooms, separated by a thin brick wall. The mousy woman knocked again. The girl and man quickly sat across from each other as if they didn't just finish doing what they were doing. The man straightened his tie and the girl combed her hair with her fingers. The man must have said something out loud because the mousy woman entered his office. Her bright smile dissipated the second she saw that he wasn't alone. I guess she could feel the sexual tension or something because she turned on her heel and slammed the door. The man pitifully called out to her, "Kate, what on earth are you still doing here?" I whipped my chair around to see my boss, Andrea, in the doorway of the office. She was clutching her work bag and had a look of concern splattered across her face. What do you mean?" I stammered. "It's 10:02 p.m., she shot back. Sure enough, it was. The office was dark around me and the city was lulling itself to sleep beneath me. I noticed a searing pounding behind my eyes and my mouth felt uncomfortably dry. How long was I watching that office for? "Is everything alright?" Andrea asked, shifting her tone to one of worry. "I only came back this late because I forgot my cell phone." "Oh," I stammered. "Yeah, everything is fine. I'm sorry. I guess I just lost track of time." My feeble excuse died slowly on my lips. "Well, alright then," she said hesitantly, turning away. "We have a week off next week, you know. You'll have plenty of time to rest while we renovate the office." "Of course," I mumbled. "Just, holler if you need me, okay?" she said as she turned to leave. The aching in my head was almost debilitating. I rubbed my eyes and took a sip of my nearly empty latte. I could have sworn that I didn't even look over at the office until 2:30 or so, and the scene I saw couldn't have lasted longer than 20 minutes. So how on earth did I lose nearly 8 hours? I packed my bag quickly and shut down my computer, keeping my eyes turned pointedly away from the office across the street. But as I turned off my office light, I couldn't help but sneak a look. I really, really wish I hadn't. They all stood there. The mousy woman, the tall girl, and the man. They were facing the window and smiling. Their lips curled in an unnaturally large grin. The corners of their mouths almost reached the tips of their eyelids, making it appear as if their faces were split in two. Their teeth looked jagged and yellow. They waved in unison as the lights in their office turned off, shoving them into darkness one by one. I swear I could still see the whites of their eyes gleam through the window, unblinking and unmoving. I didn't sleep well that night. I had feverish dreams of shifting shapes and bright lights that left my head pounding in tune to my heartbeat. I woke up at various times imagining that someone was choking me, only to discover that my sweat-stained sheets had wrapped themselves around my neck during a fitful sleep. I drifted in and out of consciousness until my alarm blared me awake at 7 a.m., forcing me to rise on my shaky feet. I dreaded going into work. Part of me wanted to call out sick and claim I got the flu, but I had a mountain load of work that I never got to yesterday and an ever-intimidating press release that I had to finish before Friday, so I wearily got ready and headed into the office. "Girl, you don't look so good," Gary commented the second I walked through the door. He was the office gossip and he played the part well. "I'm fine, Gary," I said, brushing him off. "I just didn't sleep well last night." "Please," he said, rolling his eyes. "It looks like you haven't slept in weeks." Anger flared in my chest. "What does it matter to you what I look like? I'm not dressing up for your fucking sake." I spat. Gary's eyes widened, and I noticed that a few of the coworkers had peeked their heads out from their cubicles, their faces blank and blurry. My face felt flushed and hot under their gaze. "I didn't mean to offend you," Gary said quietly, as if to calm a rabid animal. "You're never like this. Are you okay?" I averted my gaze. "I'm sorry, I guess I'm just really tired," I stammered as I brushed past him. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as I retreated to my office. I locked the door and leaned against it, closing my eyes to regain composure. I was just stressed, that's all. That had to be it. The pressure of the promotion was getting to my head. Once the week was over, I'd feel better. I took a deep breath and sat down at my desk, keeping my eyes trained away from the window. The guilt sunk in. I was such a dick to Gary. He didn't really deserve me yelling at him, especially over something so little. I quickly started drafting an apology email to him. "Hey Gary, I'm really sorry about earlier. I guess I've just been feeling pretty run down this week. I didn't mean to snap at you." I paused, my fingers suspended over the keyboard. Gary had been here for ages. He was a constant figure in the office, always hovering, always listening. If there was drama happening, Gary would know about it, which means he may know about the office across the street, or know someone who does. "Hey Gary, I'm really sorry about earlier. I guess I've just been feeling pretty run down and distracted this week. I didn't mean to snap at you. I feel like I just can't get the office across the street out of my mind. Do you remember who used to sit in the office before me? I bet they were distracted by the drama happening in the office across from us. LOL, maybe they can suggest a blinders or something. Kate. I sent the email and took a sip of water. I was cheery yet apologetic. Hopefully Gary would accept my apology and move on. But just as I was getting up to head to the bathroom, a reply came in. Hey Kate, yeah, totally fine. I get the workday blues too. But, I'm not sure if anyone told you, but Mary used to sit in your office. Maybe you could ask HR for an office change? Gary. I froze, dread seeping into my veins. Mary used to sit in my chair. Mary used to type on my keyboard. Mary used to gaze out of the same window into the same view across the street. Mary ended herself 3 years ago. The news had spread like wildfire across the office. I was an executive then, just starting to really get my foot in the door. I was still learning faces and names when the word came out that a vice president had gone up to the roof, stripped herself naked, and flung herself across the concrete barrier, plummeting to her death stories below. Apparently, she told a passing coworker that she, quote, had to get to them. There was no explanation given, just a few closed-door meetings and an HR email that claimed we should always seek out help if we're suffering from depression or stress. We talked about it around the water cooler for a while until, like everyone else, we moved on. And now I sat at her desk. I had her view. I turned hesitantly to the office across the street, hoping, praying that I would only see darkness. Instead, I saw them. The man was at his desk, typing away. He seemed happier for some reason, almost jubilant. On his desk stood an uncracked photo of himself and his mousy wife. I was surprised he was able to get the photo framed fixed so quickly, after his sexy bout with the tall girl just yesterday. On the other side of the wall stood his mousy wife. She looked younger than she had the day before. She looked happy. Just then, the tall girl entered the frame. She was wearing a tight white dress that flared at the bottom and black stiletto heels. She was carrying a box full of papers and desk plants. She paused as she entered the room and then smiled at the mousy woman. The mousy woman shook the tall girl's hand and showed her to a clean, pristine desk. It was as if it was her first day. My heartbeat quickened. She couldn't be new. She just fucked the boss yesterday. She was slapped the day before that. There's no way she's new. These people obviously knew her. They simply had to. The boss came out of the office and walked right up to the tall girl, extending his hand. She shook it with a feeble shyness, smiling down at her heels. Even from this distance, I could see the blush creep up her neck. My phone rung loudly in my ear, disrupting my train of thought. I felt nauseous now, as if I was coming down with something. Hello? I answered. Kate, Andrea's voice clipped back at me. You're 10 minutes late to the conference call. We're all waiting for you. A headache pounded beneath my eyeball. The call was at 3 p.m. It was 9:30 or 10 a.m. at the latest. I had only just sat down, but then I noticed the clock on my computer. Its black numbers were unmistakable. 3:10 p.m. I'm so sorry, Andrea, I murmured quickly. I just lost the conference number. I'm dialing in now. Okay, please do. I dialed in and pressed the phone to my ear, glancing quickly back at the window across the street. They were all still there, frozen in time. The boss had his hand outstretched, his fingers brushing the blushing tall woman. The mousy woman looked on, her neck stiff and her feet squared. Every few seconds, they twitched slightly, as if they were in a video game experiencing a never-ending glitch, over and over again. The nightmares were worse that night. This time they were filled with swirling dresses and red, blooming flowers that withered and died in rotting eyeballs. Blood clotted on lips, fluorescent lights flashed and shattered, spraying glass on threadbare carpet. I awoke in a pool of my own sweat, feeling feverish and weak. But it was Friday. If I could just make it through today, it would all be better. At least that's what I told myself as I drove into the office, white-knuckled and shaking. The office was quiet when I arrived, or rather, hushed. It was as if someone had stuffed cotton balls into my ear canals. Everything seemed softer, muffled. Blurry, indistinguishable faces waved hello from shadowy cubicles. I headed into my office and shut the door, immediately turning my attention to the office across the street. At first, there was only deep, unflinching darkness. But then, as if they knew I was watching, the lights turned on. It was apparent that much time had passed. The man was seated in his office, his hands drumming along his keyboard. I noticed he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. His hair was a bit grayer and he had a slight frown on his face. The photo of him and his wife was cracked once more, shoved off in the corner of his desk, forgotten and dusty. He appeared to be under stress, looking up at the clock above the doorway and then visibly biting his lip. Not yet, not yet, not yet. I could almost hear him speak. Not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. The mousy woman was in the attached room, gently tapping her pen on her bottom lip. It left dark, blue smudges. She didn't wear her wedding ring either. She kept glancing at her watch around her pudgy wrist, sighing with each peek. Almost, almost, almost. I could almost hear her whisper. Almost, almost, almost. The tall girl entered the office just then, putting her bag down lightly on the desk chair. It was only when she took off her jacket that my breath caught in my throat. She was pregnant. She was at least 8 months pregnant. She placed one hand gently in her swollen stomach, nodding politely at the mousy woman. The tall girl was wearing a black dress with a vibrant red scarf. It matched her lip color. Mesmerized, I moved closer to the window. The mousy woman moved closer to her. It's time, it's time, it's time. The mousy woman lunged at the tall girl, completely taking her by surprise. In her one hand was a large, shining knife that she'd grabbed from under her keyboard. The mousy woman plunged it into the girl's stomach repeatedly, each stab making a sickening plop. The tall girl shrieked, her hands moving down to protect her bleeding abdomen, but it was no use. The mousy girl kept stabbing and stabbing and stabbing, her hands painted a violent red. The man must have heard the commotion because he'd entered the room in a heartbeat, his eyes scanning the damage. The tall girl had now sunk into the floor, her dress ripped and raw. One hand clutched her swollen and bleeding stomach. The other reached out for the man. The mousy woman just stared, her feet square. "Please, help this time." I could almost hear her. "This time, this time, this time." He stepped over the pooling blood, his hands outstretched to her. She smiled weakly, reaching back out to him, but he didn't grab her hand. No. He grabbed her scarf. With both hands, he yanked the scarf until it was tight around her throat. Her eyes were first painted with shock, then despair. He pulled tighter and tighter as she feebly tried to loosen the scarf that was now her noose. And then she was still. Her body slumped onto the office carpet, her head rolling onto her shoulder. Her eyes watched me, blank and still. The man and the mousy woman stared at her body for a while, until they were staring at me, their smiles creeping larger across their blood-spattered cheeks. I pounced for the phone, my fingers typing out 911 in jerky, frantic motions. 911, what's your emergency? A smooth voice answered. I want to report a murder at 535 Boylston Street. A pregnant woman was just stabbed. I don't think she's alive anymore. Okay, the operator cooed. Of course she's not alive anymore. No human could survive 37 stab wounds to the abdomen. My blood ran cold. I didn't tell you my name. I answered back stupidly. Oh, poor little Kate. The voice hissed in my ear. You never had to. You always call me on Fridays. I tore the phone from my ear and threw it across the desk. It crashed limply to the floor, the dial tone ringing and ringing in my ear. My heart was pumping so furiously I thought it would explode right out of my chest. I looked back at the office across the street, terror boiling in my veins. The tall girl was perched on the man's desk, her red dress riding up her thigh. He was leaning towards her, smiling and twirling a pin in between his fingers. No, she was dead. I just saw her die. I watched the tall coworker sob openly, her hand pressed against her swollen cheek. The red flower in her hair crumpled to the ground, blooming and withering. That happened before. That happened days before. On the other side of the wall stood the man's mousy wife. She looked younger than she had the day before. She looked happy. Just then, the tall girl entered the frame. She was wearing a tight white dress that flared at the bottom and black stiletto heels. She was wearing a box full of papers and desk plants. The plants were coated in blood. No, that's not right. That's not how it happened. None of this was how it happened. The boss came out of his office and walked right up to the tall girl, extending his hand. She shook it with a feeble shyness, smiling down at her heels. He placed his hands on her slender neck and squeezed. The mousy woman laughed. The picture frame cracked. You always call on Fridays. I screamed and rushed over to my desk, tearing out pieces of notebook paper in my wake. I threw them on the ground and took out a pin, uncapping it with my mouth. I spit the cap out across the floor and took off my heels, falling to my knees. You always call on Fridays. You always call on Fridays. Friday. Today was Friday. Today was the day the tall girl died. The man was done with being coy because he took his hand and slid it all the way up the girl's tight dress, pulling her panties off in one quick motion. He wound them around her neck. The mousy woman laughed. The picture frame wobbled on the desk. You always call on Fridays. Tuesday was when I first noticed them. Yes, it was Tuesday. But that wasn't the day they met. No, that was the day the tall girl was slapped. The mousy girl was now comforting another coworker, a man. He seemed to be in his late 30s with peppered hair and tanned skin. His hand was on the tall woman's lower back, comforting her. The mousy woman took a knife and stabbed the tall girl's stomach. The knife's edge went all the way through her back. Blood spurted between the man's fingers. I closed my eyes and tried to block out the office across the street. Thursday was when the mousy woman and the man met the tall girl. She was wearing a white dress, her first day. Then what? The seduction? The man was gently rubbing her thigh, all the while maintaining eye contact with the sheet of paper he had in front of him. The girl was playing coy too, leaning forward slightly to point out something on the paper. Her tits bounced near his flushed cheek. The picture frame fell. The mousy woman sobbed. Yes. White dress was the first time they met. The seduction, the red dress, had to be the second event. The third? The tall girl sobbed openly, her hand pressed against her swollen cheek. The red flower in her hair crumpled to the ground. Blooming. Yes, that's right. The timeline is coming together. But what about the fourth? That was the day she died. That was when she was pregnant. The events must have happened months before each other. The mousy woman lunged at the tall girl. In her hand was a large, shining knife that she had grabbed from under her keyboard. Plop, plop, plop. Oh, poor little Kate. Don't you know you always call on Fridays? I dialed 911 feverishly, the office coming in and out of focus. 911, what's your emergency? A smooth voice answered. I want to report a murder at 535 Boylston Street. A pregnant woman was just stabbed. I don't think she's alive anymore. Okay, the operator cooed. Of course she's not alive anymore. But how will you know for certain unless you check? You know you want to. You know you have to. Of course I have to. You always call on Fridays. I stumbled out of my office door, the dial tone still ringing in my ear. My office was dark, and the carpet had been torn up. Wasn't the renovation supposed to happen next week? How long had I been in there? But it didn't matter. Down the elevator I went. Down, down, down. The streetlights looked like stars. I wanted to climb up them, up, up, up to the tippity top, but I couldn't. I had to see the office across the street. I had to get to them. The door wasn't locked to the 13th floor. I stepped across its threshold, half expecting something to happen, but nothing did. The office looked like mine. The carpets were torn up like mine, but there was something different. The red flower on the floor, blooming and withering, blooming and withering. I walked closer to the light at the end of the office, the box heavy in my arms. Hi, it's so great to meet you. A mousy woman greeted me. My name is Karen. Hi, Karen. I'm Kate, the new receptionist. I smiled back, shifting the box in my arms. We shook hands awkwardly. Oh, here, darling. You can put that here. Karen gestured to an empty desk. Relieved, I unloaded my box and straightened my white dress. Just then, a man in his mid-30s entered the room. He had tan skin and peppered hair. My heart leapt to my throat. He was much more handsome than I thought he would be. Why now, you must be Kate, he cooed. It's a pleasure to meet you. Our hands touched, and I looked down shyly at my feet. I could tell I was blushing. Karen could tell too. My husband is a great boss, she said between tight lips. I'm sure you'll be happy here. He smiled, his fingers twitching in mine. I'm sure I'll never want to leave, I answered. My last bartending job came with a set of peculiar rules with grave consequences. I dropped out of my freshman year of college when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. I had just turned 19, and although I was legally an adult, I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like a failure for dropping out, but I focused on being a parent and worked nights as a server and eventually a bartender. Everything was about as okay as it could be until shifts became more and more scarce at the restaurant I was working at. I desperately wanted more money to care for myself and my daughter, and I wanted it much faster than it would have taken to finish my degree. Anyways, I knew that bartenders made significantly more money in the city, so I started looking for job postings online. Ultimately, though, my searches were fruitless. I ended up being reached out to by a friend named Maurice that had worked at the restaurant briefly before he was recruited by another friend to work at some bar in the city. I trusted his judgment, so I agreed to come interview for the position. The people here are rich, Kel, filthy rich, but they're assholes. You're gonna need to have thick skin. I didn't mind. I was thrilled. I showed up for my interview on a Thursday night in September. I remember viscerally feeling the stark contrast between the bustling city life and the bleak, faceless building. No windows, no name. 6 stairs led down to a solid black door that I half-heartedly trusted to be the entrance to my new job. The place was beautiful. Warm, dim lighting, softly illuminated black marble high-top tables. Most of the tables were empty, but it was a Thursday after all. A couple were occupied with well-dressed women that looked to be in their 40s. One looked at me up and down with a condescending smile. I peered down at my own clothing, tugging slightly on the hem of my blouse. A man came walking briskly towards me from what seemed to be the kitchen. He was short with jet black hair that seemed to be intentionally oily. Kelly? He asked, offering his hand. He introduced himself as Craig and walked me to a table near the back. It was made clear that the job was already mine, and I was so grateful to Maurice in that moment for speaking well of me. Craig made copies of my ID and had me fill out some standard paperwork. Now, Kelly, honey, I don't know how much Maurice told you about our little spot. The nature of the work here is unique. I nodded my head, noticing Maurice out of the corner of my eye, standing behind the bar. He looked stressed. Yes, sir, he's told me some, I responded, aiming to look interested and focused. Our clientele is very affluent. They expect stellar service. They come to our place here not just for food and drinks, but for entertainment. Most of them are also very private, he said, looking down and shuffling through papers. I understand. If you choose to accept the position, you'll be signing a non-disclosure agreement. Nothing crazy. Some of our customers have very high-ranking positions in the community and would rather the details of their leisure not be shared. I have to be honest, I was a bit taken aback by this part. I also had no experience in the place of this caliber, so I kept my mouth shut and nodded in agreement. Maurice will train you behind the bar and brief you on the rules. Great. One last thing. Assuming you'll accept our offer, your employment will be contingent upon a reasonable score on our aptitude test. It'll take you maybe 15 minutes. You'll receive a link in your email. I agreed, shook Craig's hand, and he sent me behind the bar with Maurice. I was admittedly pretty excited to see Maurice. I always considered him a good friend, but he seemed distracted and tense. I attributed it to the stress of the job. Maurice began by showing me around the bar and going through the details of the drink menu. I listened intently and waited for the email with the link to pop up. Eventually, my phone dinged. Is that the test? Yeah, but we can finish up here. Just take it now, he said quickly, vigorously shining champagne glasses. I pulled up a stool and opened the link. The first half or so of the test was like any other aptitude test I'd taken online following job applications. Soon the questions became more complex, more clinical. I clicked next and a black and white abstract photo materialized on the screen. It looked like an elk. I was prompted to choose a multiple choice answer based on my first impression of the picture. Is this a freaking ink blot test? Maurice? I can't help you, Kel. Just do your best. Sorry, are you okay? I asked. Fine. Kel, listen, you're gonna make a shit ton of money here, okay? Do you see the 4 ladies in total here tonight? I scanned the room. Yes, I'm leaving with no less than $450 tonight. Tomorrow, at least double. You'll do just as well, but it's rough here sometimes. Just be prepared. I began to wonder if he had had a fight with his wife. Maybe one of the table ladies pissed him off, but the thought of that much money gave me chills. I could definitely afford a 2-bedroom working here. I just agreed with him and submitted my test. A few moments later, Maurice excused himself to the back and returned with a small stack of papers. One at a time, he slapped the papers down on the bar top from left to right. Non-disclosure, rules, contract. Contract? I asked. For the rules. That's why I set the rules down first. Not as chipper as I remember you, Maurice. The matte black paper containing the rules nearly blended with the bar top and stood in deep contrast to the other 2 papers. Fancy, I noticed. He flipped the paper over, revealing a list of rules, beautifully written in white ink. Rule 1. Those in maroon jackets are to be ignored completely, no matter what they say or how they behave. Rule number 2. If someone calls you, look before you respond. It may be inside your head, and a verbal response to a false call is equivalent to speaking to a maroon coat. Rule number 3. Our guests expect a high caliber of service. You must not deny any request from a guest. Rule number 4. Bartenders must not enter the storage room or cooler under any circumstances. I remember thinking this was insane. Surely I missed the part where this was some kind of dinner theater, an elaborate joke. The sober look on Maurice's face stopped me in my tracks. I thought of my daughter's face. What's the most you ever made in a weekend? $2,800. My underdeveloped frontal lobe took over and my hand grabbed the pen. The following day was a Friday and I was expected back at 5 p.m. I slipped in the door 15 minutes early, my black top damp from the autumn drizzle outside. I shivered and tucked my bag into a cubby behind the bar. Maurice was engaged in conversation with a woman about 50 with stylish gray hair. It was a bit busier this evening and slow jazz music warmed the atmosphere. The stylish 50-something peered over at me from her conversation with Maurice, a curious look on her face. She sidestepped and slid onto a bar stool across from where I was standing. "Good evening," she said warmly, settling into her seat. "I'm Penny." She was very beautiful with deeply saturated emerald eyes. I introduced myself, knowing she probably already inquired about me. "Penny, she's brand new. You can order from me," Maurice said. "Can I not say hello? Besides, I need something you don't have." Maurice smiled sarcastically and began cutting limes. "Kelly, I just need a charger, hun. Do you have one for this?" She held up an iPhone in pristine condition and almost the same shade of emerald as her eyes. I told her that I was sorry that I didn't have an Apple phone and asked her if she'd asked anyone else. The room seemed to go dead quiet. I felt my smile fading as I watched Miss Penny's do the same. "Kel, you have to go get her a charger," Maurice said, never looking up from the limes. "Oh, okay, I can. Across the street, there's a gas station." Unbelievable. So I crossed the very busy street in the rain to go grab unprepared Miss Penny a charger for her fancy iPhone. No biggie, I brought it back and she thanked me warmly, sliding me a $50 bill. The thing was $7.99. Keep it. A few moments later, Maurice introduced me to the barback, Nemo. He was a very short, older man with a bad limp. Maurice told me he'd been here 15 years. Because we weren't allowed in the storage room or the cooler, we had to ask Nemo for pretty much everything when we ran out. I felt horrible having to ask him for so much as time went on, but I kept reminding myself that I didn't make the rules. I would come to find that he was a very sweet and gentle man, and he even showed me photos of his grandchildren. Things became very busy that night, and Nemo, Maurice, and I were running around quite a bit. Around 9 p.m., a man sauntered over to the bar wearing a hooded maroon raincoat. He sat down near the corner of the bar, folding his hands on the bar top. He kept his hood on, but the anticipation of how he looked underneath made my heart start beating faster. I started to feel increasingly nauseated as the seconds went on. Maurice walked past me carrying a tray of appetizers. "Ignore him," he said in passing. I continued serving customers and faking smiles. The tip jar was filling up rapidly and I could count at least $15, $20 bills from where I was standing. Focus. Everything was going smoothly until an apparently tipsy Miss Penny sashayed her way up to an opening at the bar top. "Honey, the charger you gave me isn't working. The cheap thing. Let me borrow your phone a moment to check in at home." I really didn't want to do that considering I liked having my phone on me in case my daughter needed to reach me or I wanted to check in on her. She raised her eyebrows in an impatient manner and I handed over my unlocked phone. "Thanks, just a minute or two." I watched her bring my phone back to her table where she was sitting with 3 other middle-aged ladies. I didn't believe that none of her friends had a phone she could borrow, but I decided to let it go and continue working. Moments later, I heard a variety of different laughs coming from Miss Penny's table. The sounds ranged from stifled giggles to full-on roaring laughter. Leaning over the bar and peering closer, I can see that the ladies are huddled together, looking at and laughing at my phone. A burning sensation of anger and humiliation rose from the base of my spine to the top of my head. I shook Maurice's shoulder. "Maurice, they're looking through my phone. They're laughing at something on my phone." He shrugged and continued working. I was beyond furious at my helplessness. My open eyes stung from the start of tears. "Hey, forget about it. You're doing a great job. Tear it up, girl." Somebody cheered from the bar top. I looked around, terrified to see the maroon man with his hood down, smiling and cheering me on. My heart dropped as I saw the black circles under his eyes and nearly completely rotted teeth. He was smiling excessively and nodding my way. "Tear it up, girl." His face was peppered with raised scars, all in different stages of healing. Was he being supportive or ridiculing me? I couldn't tell. I quickly turned my head towards Maurice, who was sporting a very concerned look. He slowly gave me a thumbs up. "Ignore it," he reminded me. "Tear it up?" I repeated to Maurice. Maybe, like, break a leg? Knock him down? I don't know. But ignore it. I nodded and continued working, ignoring my frustration with the bullies at the table mocking my entire life. Around 10 p.m., I heard someone call me from the kitchen. "Kelly, your mom's on the phone. It's about your daughter, something about a peanut." I slammed the unopened beer in my hand down on the cooler and turned on my heel to race to the kitchen when Maurice grabbed my shoulder hard. "What?" I shouted. "Where are you going?" "My daughter's on the phone. She has an allergy. I have to check." "I didn't hear anything, Kelly." "You always must check if someone else heard it." "Maybe you weren't listening," I said, breathing shakily and shivering. "I'm always listening. You're okay. Take a seat for a moment. Take a break," he said in a soothing tone. I was steadily losing trust in Maurice too. Tears stung my eyes again as they traveled over to the maroon man. He held up a dirty napkin with the words "tear it up" written in god-awful writing. He was nodding and giggling like a child. He was really starting to piss me off. Looking more closely at the maroon man's artwork, I could see that the letters looked to be written in a perfect crimson color. I grimaced and strained my eyes to see more closely. In his right hand, he held a small box opener, and his left arm was dripping blood. "Maurice!" He looked over almost instinctively at the maroon man. "There's nothing we can do unless a guest requests him to be removed," he said. The sting of tears had become a full-blown stream falling down my cheeks as my nervous system lit up with terror. An older man with a white beard caught wind of the maroon man's bleeding and seemed mildly disgusting at best. He beckoned Maurice over with the curl of his finger, and Maurice disappeared to the back. A few moments later, a man in a white coat escorted the maroon man back to the kitchen and what I assumed to be out the back door. Relief washed over me and I started breathing more deeply. I felt sorry for the man. I wanted to go home. I wanted to see my daughter. I was mixing a drink for a woman at Penny's table when an ear-splitting, visceral scream came cascading from the kitchen into the bar. It sounded like an animal being gutted alive. "Maurice, did you hear that?" I said, breathlessly. He turned his head away from me, grinding a lime into the bottom of a mojito glass. "No, I don't hear anything." Liar. I brought the pretentious drink over to Penny's pretentious drunk friend, and Penny finally gave me my phone back. She looked me up and down like a predator and told me she's glad my blonde phase stayed in the past. She slid a $100 bill across the table and thanked me for my entertainment. I continued making drinks, watching the tip jar fill to an unjustifiable volume, and sustaining comments and requests that were berating at best from various customers. I was asked to show a man my tattoos, even the ones I had to unbutton my top to access. One man refused to let me button my shirt back up until I sang the national anthem for him, his eyes covering my skin the whole time. 12 a.m. came, and it was clear we weren't getting a break from work or otherwise. I needed the money badly, and as long as I left in one piece, I was planning on sustaining the night. Nemo came and stood next to me, putting his hand on top of mine. "You're gonna be okay, honey. You stay, or you finish your contract and never come back again. Either way, you're gonna be okay." "I'm not coming back tomorrow, Nemo. The money I make tonight will hold me over until I find something else," I said, wiping off a liquor-soaked menu. Nemo's eyes were saddened, and he lifted his hand off of my own. "You don't have a choice, Kelly. Didn't you know?" "Of course I have a choice, Nemo. They can sue me if they want to, but they can't drag me back into this fucking place." He paused, looking at me like he was mourning me at my own funeral. "You'd be lucky if they only dragged you back. Think of your daughter." I backed away from Nemo at that point, shaking my head in disbelief. He's crazy too. My only friend. 1 a.m. came, and I had 2 more hours in hell before I would leave this place, file a police report, and never ever return. The youngest man I'd seen at the bar yet sat directly across from where I was standing, cutting fruit. "Is this Kelly?" he asked Maurice, as if I couldn't speak for myself. Maurice nodded, clearly annoyed. You could feel the history between them. The man was obviously already drunk. "Kelly, have you met Maurice's wife?" he asked, tilting his head to the side. I shook my head, exhausted. "How about you call her and let's play a little prank on her?" Maurice's face turned to stone, and he gripped tightly on the bottle opener in his hand. "Let's have you call Toya and tell her Maurice is leaving her for you, that he was too much of a little bitch to tell her himself," he said, sneering like a badly behaved child. My face burned with embarrassment. Are all the rich so sadistic? Just then, the man with the infatuation with my tattoos sat next to the sneering trust fund boy, wrapping his arm around his shoulder, drunkenly engaging him in conversation and relieving the tension for a moment. "Go take a break," I whispered to Maurice, hoping the man would forget his request. Maurice snuck off into the kitchen. "So, Ronnie, you've met Kelly, huh? Doesn't she have the sexiest tattoos?" the older man asked, making unwelcomed eye contact with me. The drunken young man nodded, uninterested and looking at his phone now. "I really like the one with the little dove." "My favorite too, sir," I remarked, smiling against my will. It was true, I'd gotten it for my daughter. "Let's you and me have that one, huh?" he slurred. You want the same tattoo? By all means, I won't get you for copyright infringement," I said playfully, immediately feeling tense from my boldness. "No, I want that one," he said, cocking his head to the side and smiling gleefully. He slid something green and plastic out of his pocket, clicking a level with his thumb to expose the tip of a box cutter. My heart pounded in my chest and my vision went blurry. There was no way the guests could take things this far. I looked around, silently begging anyone to have the decency to interject. My hands went cold, my fingers twitching. I peered at the exit to see the bouncer with his massive arms crossed, centering himself in front of the door. Hypervigilance took over and I scanned the room desperately. Maurice was gone and I knew he wouldn't be able to help me anyways. He was under contract too. Fucking contract. The two Machiavellian men grasped each other's shoulders, laughing at my distress. "Come on now. I'm a good tipper, sweetheart. Just the little dove," the tattoo fetishist cooed. I continued scanning the environment, my body paralyzed with fear. The rules lay on the back counter, a death threat with an elegant font. The box cutter in the monster's hand, the doorman, the phone, Nemo, all of it useless. The bloody napkin lay on the tiled floor, riddled with shoe marks from the ongoing evening. A note from my psychotic cheerleader, arguably the best part of the night, all things considered. Tear it up. Tear it up. The fucking contract. There's antibacterial soap in the back. May I wash my arm first? He frowned in consideration and nodded, shrugging. Quickly, I walked with tears in my eyes into the kitchen. I scrubbed my arm to prepare for a procedure fit for the Saw franchise. I turned to check the back door and it was chained shut. I peered out into the bar area, beckoning for Nemo. He came limping over. I asked Nemo to type a message for my daughter that I loved her in case anything went sideways here before I got to go home for the night. My hands are too shaky, I said, tears streaming down my face. He nodded and took my phone, squinting and typing with one finger. Why are you even here, Nemo? If you know how bad it is, why are you here? Without looking up, he told me about his sick wife and her medical bills, his family in another country, and some other unfortunate circumstances. I felt bad for him. I really did. Life is hard. Nemo's handed me back my phone before his eyes widened with trepidation, noticing the butcher's knife pressed up against his stomach. Kelly, open the storage room. Now, I spat, pressing the knife slightly into the tough membrane holding his guts together. He raised his hands above his head in surrender. They'll kill me for this, he begged. My contract. Rip it apart, I said, being mindful of where I was standing so as not to step into the storage room. He scanned the storage room hastily, then pulled down a small metal lockbox from one of the shelves. With shaking hands, he reached for the keys in his pocket and unlocked it. He pulled out a stack of papers, the top page a copy of my ID stapled onto the contract. Maurice's too, I said calmly. He looked up at me with confusion and began to chuckle softly, with tears in his eyes. Maurice doesn't have a contract. This is his place. Maurice owns the place. He owns you. I felt the bile rise into my throat. My entire body was on fire. I trusted him. He'd met my daughter, my family. Tear it up, Nemo. He ripped the contract down the middle, his tears dropping onto the pieces. When the two halves of my contract fell to the storage room floor, another stack of papers remained in Nemo's hands. A copy of a man's ID stapled to another contract. I took it from Nemo's hand and looked closely to see the picture of a young man, a much younger, less broken, and disheveled version of the Maroon Man. What is this, Nemo? I whispered. He fulfilled his contract. He was what you become after. Was? He broke his only rule by trying to get you out. I left that night and never returned. I work a minimum wage job now, and my daughter and I still live in a one-bedroom apartment. I wouldn't have it any other way. Don't follow the whistling. As a kid growing up in Louisiana, I spent a lot of time in the woods. Hunting, fishing, just standard things. There's lots of legends and tales of these woods, a lot of which came from my grandfather. Once I got old enough to travel the woods alone, he started telling me some of these legends. Petey Peepon was one of them. I was old enough to believe that the story of Petey Peepon was just something he made up to mess with me. It sounded pretty ridiculous after all. He told me if I ever heard a whistling out in the woods, do not follow it, or Petey Peepon would take me away. Standard ghost story stuff. Early one morning, before the sun had risen, I was out in the woods. I was sitting on a log, waiting for the sun to come up so I could begin my squirrel hunt, listening for any sign of tree branches moving or acorns hitting the ground. It can be pretty peaceful. I used to live for those moments. The cool, early morning air, the silence of the woods, is a fantastic feeling. Once the sun had come up enough for me to see without the help of a light, I stood up and started to really survey the area, deciding on which direction I would go. I wasn't worried about staying close to the camp. At the time, I was 14, and my dad had instilled upon me basic survival instincts. I knew to keep in mind what direction the sun was to me when I started walking, and to put it to the opposite side when I returned, depending on the time of day, of course. I had never gotten lost by just doing that. After walking a good 5 miles, stopping to bag a few squirrels along the way, I came across a small clearing and decided to rest for a minute. The woods had gotten silent, so I guessed that since nothing was moving, it would be best to stop and wait for the signs of squirrels. I first heard the whistle from my right. It wasn't a whistle someone does when they're trying to get your attention, more like someone whistling a song. What kind of idiot is walking around whistling when people are trying to hunt? I heard the whistling coming closer, and I could tell whoever this was coming right where I was sitting. Out in the woods, we don't like to yell at each other. We like to make this whooping noise. It's kind of like the universal, I'm over here signal. Whoop! I was hoping that whoever was coming my way would take the hint and either leave or stop whistling, at least whoop back to me. However, they did not. I couldn't hear them coming any closer, but they just kept whistling. I stand up from my log and look in the direction of the whistling. I couldn't see anyone there. Putting it off as someone who spent way too much on fancy camouflage, I decided to yell out, "Hey, I'm trying to hunt over here." Still, The whistling keeps going. Getting very irritated, I started walking towards the whistling so I could tell this idiot to shut up. I walked a good 500 yards and never saw anyone. I stopped to scratch my head and wonder if I was going crazy when I heard the whistling again, this time behind me. Now I'm thinking it's my cousin messing with me. He was next to me the night my grandfather was telling me about the thing in the woods, and he knew my hunting spot. I walk back in that direction, saying, "Vret, if that's you, I swear to God I'm gonna kill you." I wasn't worried about hunting anymore. I just wanted to know who was messing with me. I get back to where the clearing was, and it wasn't there. It's like the trees just magically grew back, and I was more confused than I had ever been in my life. Whistling from my right this time. At this point, I realized that I have no idea where I am. Nothing looks right anymore. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that someone moved all the trees around when I walked away. By that time, I realized that I need to get out of there. My stomach sank when I realized that at this time, the sun was in the middle of the sky. I had no way of knowing which way to go. I felt confused and extremely lost. I could hear the whistling coming from behind me again. I started walking in the opposite direction of the whistling, hoping I could get away from whatever was causing it. I walked about 5 minutes when the whistling started coming from in front of me and was getting closer. I remembered I had a gun and stood my ground. I didn't see any other way of getting out of there. I saw only what I can describe as a blurry figure walking towards me. When I say blurry, I mean that it was like my eyes just refused to focus on whatever this thing was walking towards me. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Nothing helped. It was just a black, blurry blob in the form of a human. I fired at it and heard this horrible screech, something I can only describe as microphone feedback, but so loud I thought my eardrums were going to burst. I took off running and just didn't stop. I managed to find a deer trail and started following it. Things started to look familiar at that point, and I started seeing used shotgun shells on the ground. They looked like mine, and when I realized that, I remembered where I was. I followed the deer trail back to the camp where my dad and grandpa were. When my dad saw me, he started screaming at me, asking where I was, why I hadn't come back to camp. I asked him what he meant. I'd only been gone a few hours, and why were they back so early? I never came back to camp that night. I had been gone for almost a full day. I decided not to tell them about what happened, mostly because I knew there was no way my dad would believe me. I made up a story that I had gotten lost and just camped out in the woods that night. I wasn't allowed to hunt alone for a while. That night, as we're sitting around the fire, my dad left to answer nature's call, and my grandpa said, "You followed the whistling, didn't you?"